Hi guys, welcome back. Domain for Identity and Access Management. In this chapter, we are going to see compare and contrast identity and access management concept. This is the list. We are going to see logical access control, identifications, authentications, authorizations and accounting, multi-factor authentications, federated identity, single sign-on SSO, transitive trust. First, we are going to see identification and authentications. Identification occurs when a user or device presents information such as username, a process ID, a smart card, or another unique identifier and claim an identity. Authentication is the process of validating an identity. This occurs when the user provides appropriate credentials such as the correct password with the username. Authorizations and auditing. When identification through the presentations and accept of credential is accomplished, the credential must be measured against a listing of all known credentials by the authentication service to determine authorizations of the request before access rights during the session can be established. Authorization is based on security policy. Accounting keeps track of the resource a user accesses by keeping a record of events of authentication and authorization actions. Accounting functions log session statistics and user information, which then can be used for management tasks such as access control and resource utilizations. Additional capability including billing, trend analysis, and capacity planning. Implementing accounting components of AAA authentication, authorization, auditing requires special server consideration. These are the core components of AAA, So one is the device that wants to access the network is known as the client. Second, the policy enforcement point PEP is the authenticator. The PEP enforces the condition of the client access. Third is the policy information point PIP which holds the data relevant to the decisions on whether to grant access to the client. Fourth is policy decision point PDP is the crux of AAA decision. The PDP is responsible for making the final decisions of whether to grant access to the client. The accounting and reporting system tracks the client network. The last one, the accounting and reporting system tracks the client network usage and reports to who, what, where, when, and why. So core AAA components are logical functions that can be combined and are not necessarily physical devices. So authentication factor. This is the 5 points. It's very important. There's something such as a password or PIN, something you have, something you are, something you do, something you are. On the right side is a multi-factor. The example for multi-factor authentication. So what is the authentication factor? An authentication factor is a special category of security credentials that is used to verify the identity and authorizations of an user attempting to gain accesses, send communications, or request data from secure network systems or applications. In the past, IT organizations have relied on unique username and self-selected password or phrases as a primary method of authenticating user identity and providing access to the system. Today is completely changed as an organization places increasing emphasis on data security due to the regulatory and compliance concerns. Many organizations uses multi-factor authentications to control access to secure data systems and applications. And as an organization increases the sophisticated of its authentication mechanisms, it does a better job of preventing unauthorized access from accessing the system and mitigating against data breach and malicious cyber attack. So let's see the types of authenticator one by one. Single factor, multi-factor authentications, mutual authentications. This three is there's a number of authentication, but the three is very important. So single factor authentication, is an identity verification process that requires the access requesting party. Example can be person, software, or machine. So to produce to the authenticating party a single identifier, a single factor that is linked to its identity. Single factor authentications is used by default in many systems because it is easy and cheap to implement. The most prominent single factor authentication is the password. Other identifiers commonly used include SMS code to registered mobile device, one OTP generated by the physical device or by software running on mobile device or computer. So SFA, I mean the single factor authentication is considered less secure with less secure than MFA, multi-factor authentications. We will see next topic, especially when the identifier is a vulnerable password, because the password it can easily steal that from victim. Okay, so multi-factor authentication. So a method of authenticating users must be designed and implemented properly for an organization to achieve established business goal and security control objectives. Several common factors are used for authentication, as I showed before. Something you know, something you have, something you are, something you do, or something you are. So the last slide I showed before. So this is very important. So when we talk about this multi-factor authentications, because the authentication factors provide a means of implementing multi-factor authentications. Multi-factor authentications provide additional security because account access is no longer possible with only a password. Okay. So the most common form of authentication combines to something form of authentications, a username and password or passphrase. This form is easily implemented across many type of interface, including standard keyboard, assistive technology interface. If both values match the credential associated with the authorization system database, the credential can be authenticated and authorization for a connection. So let's talk about the mutual authentications. Mutual authentication is also known as a two-way authentication. It's a security process in which entities authentication each other before actual communications occurs. In a network environment, this requires that both the client and the server must provide digital certifications to prove their identities. In a mutual authentication process, connections can occur only if the client and the server exchange, verify, and trust each other's certificates. The certificates exchange occurs by means of the TLS, Transport Layer Security Protocol. The core of the process is to make sure the client communicate with the legitimate server and server cooperate only with the client who attempt access for legitimate purpose. The mutual authentication process involves three important certificates: root CA certificate, server SSL certificate, client SSL certificate. You guys can find more information and Google it. So then you move on the next slide. Biometric. 3 something you are. So biometric or biological measurements or physical characteristics that can be used to identify individual. For example, you can see on the right side fingerprint mapping, facial recognitions, and retina scans, and all form of biometric technology. So these are just most recognized options. So there is two categories. There's 3 types. There's a few types actually. The types of biometrics: biological biometric, morphological biometric, behavioral biometric. As you can see, there's just 2 important: behavioral and physiological. So the behavioral is a voice, gating, signature, and physiological is a DNA, vein print, face, ear, fingerprint, iris. Okay, let's move on the next topic. Biometric error. So this is also very important. The false acceptance rate, FAR, false reject rate, and then crossover error rate. When the system accepts an intruder who should be rejected. So FRR is when the system ejects an authorized user. Crossover error is a metric for comparing biometric systems, the point where FA or FRR are equal. So we have to consider this is like pros and cons, so you have to consider this. So when you're implementing the biometric on your organizations. Then federated identity. The means of linking a person's electronic identity and attributes stored across multiple distinct identity and management systems. Means of linking a user's identity with their privilege in a manner that can be used across business boundaries, allows a user to have a single identity that they can use across different businesses. Example: Google, Facebook, Microsoft. Is a way to connect identity management system by allowing identity to cross multiple jurisdictions. A political federations involves myriad equal participant collaboration through agreement and agreed upon rules, or mediator who can represent their own political agenda. In the United Nations, for example, each government body assigns its own ambassador to speak for the country interests. A federation identity management solution transfer this idea into technology by assigning a administrative account capable of enumerating local security principle and resource. The federation system is accessible from each domain. Thus, account is one area can be granted access rights to any other resource, whether local or remote, within the communicating domains. This enables enterprise to exchange identity information securely across internet domain and can integrate access to application across distinct business units within a single organization. When the user logs into a service, the service provider trusts the identity provider to validate the credential instead of providing credential to the service provider. This type of enterprise solution provide flexibility for organizations with when acquisition happens, or when individual business units maintains independent authentication mechanism across applications. So let's move on the next slides. Single sign-on SSO allows a user to authenticate one time and then access resource in the environment without needing to re-authenticate. Different from password synchronization. Vulnerabilities: if an attacker uncovers user's credentials, they will have access to all that user's resource. May also be single point of failure here. So distributed enterprise networks often include many different resources, each of which might require a different mechanisms or protocol for authentications and access control. So to reduce user supports and authentication complexity, a single sign-on capable of granting access across multiple services might be desirable. SSO solutions can use a central meta directory service or can sequester service behind a series of proxy applications. As with the SOA service-oriented architecture approach, in the SOA network environments, the client-facing proxy applications provide a standard mechanism for interacting with each services called wrapper, handling specialized logon, authentication, and access control functions behind the scenes and out of sight of the consuming user or services. All applications still require a password for login, but the software stores this password. When an application requires login, the software automatically retrieves the password and provides it to applications on the user's behalf, resulting in authentication's login. So the user still has a password for each system that must be changed based on organizational policy. Let's move on next slides. Transitive access. And in addition to the aforementioned mechanism for provisioning, identifications and access control, transitive trust relationship can be configured to allow user to traverse domain. This provides access across an enterprises or multiple enterprises, connecting resource with the users across multiple resource pools. Two domains can be configured to share a trust by configuring the administrative connection between two resource pools. You can see the picture, the very good examples. Within the capability domains, a limited form of interoperation can be assigned directly between two resource pools through the administrative actions within each to specifically design the other as trusted resource pools and allow enumerations of accounts and available resource. So access control over any resource can then be granted or denied to any account in either domain. This connections is termed trusted, which is like a direct agreement between allied countries. If the trust is configured so that any domain trusts domain A, will then trust all domain that domain A trusts, this connection is called a transitive trust. This is like having your sibling trust a friend of your father, and the arrangement turns transitive if you and your sibling agree to trust everyone your father trusts. There's a best example of exam tips. A one-way trust, domain A trusts domain B, allows the resource in domain A to be accessed by the security principals in domain B. A two-way trust allows each domain to trust member of either domain. Example, domain A and domain B resource can be accessed by authorized requests from user accounts in either domain A or domain B. Let's move on next slide. Exam preparations. Which of the following is terms used whenever two or more parties authenticate each other? Answer: mutual authentication. B, mutual authentication. Okay, that's it guys for this video. Please subscribe my channel, share the video if you like, press the bell button to get more update. See you. We will see more practice lab next video, later on video. Please subscribe my channel. Have a good day. Bye bye.